Ooh, waterfall effect. If you want to know what this is, by the way, it's a bunch of Mod Podge that I put onto a piece of resin and then I sort of peeled it off. Hello, this is the first episode of the Diorama Fabulous Craft Shop. For years, I've been wanting to make a waterfall diorama. My first attempt looked like this. It's pretty good, but it just didn't quite have the look that I was going for, you know? I've wanted the water on these waterfalls to always look very tranquil and peaceful and swimmable. Okay, so let me show you what I'm talking about here. Just extending the tripod here, sorry guys. The important thing to know about this resin pour is the murkiness of the water. Because I know that I want the water to have a good, like, in-between of turquoise and green. So that it looks sort of natural, but also with this little magical tint to it. Today, I'm going to be pouring something that's like a full inch worth of water, like up to here, hopefully. Hopefully I have enough resin for that. Again, I want the water to look very deep and swimmable, as I've said earlier. And the only way to achieve that is to really tint the resin to be really dark. I also want some of these rocks to show up. I think that the depth I want to achieve is somewhat similar to this test piece that I've made. Today, I am going on camera to achieve that look with a resin pour. It's going to be a little bit of a tutorial, a how-to about resin pours, my experience with them, how to make them look good, and also just because I find resin pours to be very relaxing to watch, and I love them. And hopefully, we can all learn something along the way. And if you're lucky, I'll even read a little bit of literature during the B-roll footage, instead of some annoying stock music. The first thing that you should do is construct your dam. Alright, the damming is complete. I think that we're all good in that department. I'm just gonna do a time jump and I'll pour the resin. I'll see you there. Bye, guys. Okay, bye. In play structure. This is where I'm going to be pouring the resin. So, these are all the materials that I got out here today. First of all, rubber gloves. These have already been used, but all they got is paint on them. They're fine. We got the resin themselves. This is 32 ounces, 16 ounces, each of these. We got paint to dye it with. We got stir sticks. And we got our mixing cups. Now, usually what you want to do with mixing cups is put one mixing cup into another and pour water into it gradually so that you can mark all the ounceage. That way you can just mix the resin straight into this cup and then take it out. And then next time you want to do it, you can just put another one back into there. These cups are from the local Chinese place, but this cup is, I found, was slightly different, so it didn't come out to be the same ounceage, so I just made it its own mixing cup, and I'm going to be using that today, just so that I can get rid of it. And lastly, I got some isopropyl alcohol and a towel here. This is because isopropyl alcohol, like, disintegrates uncured resin. So this is actually a good thing to have on hand just in case of any emergency, because you definitely don't want the resin drying inside your clothes or anything. So without further ado, let's get mixing. Okay, I think that'll be about good. Okay. One of the biggest lies in the history of Alumilite resin is that you can't use acrylic paint. The manual says you can't use acrylic paint to dye it, but this is not true at all. I've used so much acrylic paint to dye this crap, and basically the only problem is that if you use way too much, it gets like a little bit softer. So, you know, maybe if you use like 1,000,000 gallons of this stuff, then it inhibits the cure. But I'm going to show you today that it works perfectly fine. Now I'm going to want to have to put a kind of a line here to darken it up. I hope I don't put in too much. I think I put in way too much. You know, calm down. It's fine. Okay, see that? That's a little bit of what I want, I think. Maybe a little bit more jerk. I'll put it on the spoon here first. That's probably a good idea. If you start pouring it and you come to be unhappy with the color in it, you can still fix that, and I'm going to show you how to do that in a minute. But for now, we're fine. Now here comes the fun part. And, as I've promised, I'm going to read you a little bit of literature while I do so. So, here we go.
That day we spent most of the morning and noontime on a tiring trek through the woods. The day's hiking was painful, as last night neither of us could sleep much, and the path we took was steep and slippery in many places. The trip was so wearying, and I was so athirst, that I began to dream about if I came across the spring belonging to a gorgeous water nixie, with golden blonde hair and green eyes, and if she gave me water to drink. Surprisingly, my dream was answered in the way Christians say God answers prayers. As I had finished my daydream, we heard the sound of rushing water. We followed the pleasing sound to come upon a shallow ridge, and inside we peered to find, oh joy, a beautiful waterfall flowing into a lake so green and pure. We flew down the hollow wherein the water was falling, a small, secluded, and beautiful place protected by the surrounding woods and protruding cliff sides. The waterfall fell out of a large clump of stones, the cracks between which the water must have eaten tunnels through over time. The water came out at 5 separate points and formed straight and thin sprays of glittering crystalline water that terminated noisily into the enchanting blue-green waters below, and produced a fine mist that stayed trapped inside that large hollow, and even seemed to wet my face. As for the lake, I could not espy if it turned into a river anywhere, so where the water went I did not know. The lake was long and wide, and in the middle I dare say it got quite deep. Indeed, it really did look like the kind of place where one would find a golden-haired water nixie. Sir Bruce and I got down on our knees. I washed my face and filled my canteen full of water and drank heartily. The water tasted so pure and clean, and so cold and so sweet. We gave some to the horses. As we drank there, slightly above the crashing din of the waterfall, I heard a voice. "Hello!" it cried. "Hey, you!" Alerted, I looked up, and saw the form of a man poking out from a cave in the rock wall above, waving to us dramatically with his arms. I stood there and glared at him. He went back into the mouth of the cave, as I thought, to get a weapon. Bruce and I gripped the hilts of our swords. After about a minute, he reappeared from behind the waterfall. We could see that he was holding no weapon, and by his ragged brown clothing and grizzled appearance, looked like a harmless old hermit. Cautiously, Sir Bruce and I went to meet him. "Is this your land?" I asked. "If you don't mind, may we drink here and shortly be on our way?" "Yes," he responded. "Don't worry, here I am very friendly to strangers and travelers, as long as they are friendly to me. I understand you to be wayfarers, but why did you wayfare here, to a place not well known and far from any road?" "We did not mean to travel here, only we are avoiding the road as these are dangerous times." "We are traveling to the castle of the Helmberg to join the war effort," I responded intently. "And help win the grace of God," Sir Bruce added piously. "Oh, serious travelers, aren't you?" he said with a comical frown on his face. "Questing to find the Grail too, I should think?" he added humorously. "Well, yes, that too," I added honestly. Here he gave a genuine laugh, the kind only a fat monk can make, which immediately endeared me to him. "Well, you have found yourself in a good place," he said proudly and mysteriously. "We have told you who we are. Now who are you, old hermit?" Sir Bruce questioned brashly. "I am the hermit of the Holy Falls. At least, these holy falls, for there are many all around the world, and I am the sole population of my monastery," he responded. To make the boring meetings and greetings shorter, he agreed to let us rest in his monastery, as he called it, and to give us food and bless us. and so he led us back along the edge of the rock walls, behind the cloudy mists of the falling water, and into a small cave entrance. Inside we walked along a cave passage, relying on the light from the cave mouth. Right as he asked us if we could see all right, I slipped and fell into a shallow body of water. Sir Bruce pulled me out, and the monk said to me, laughing, "You were lucky you had slipped there. Anywhere else, and a stalagmite may have gone through your brain pan." Then he led us through another turn in the cave, one even darker. We walked up a short flight of steps, evidently carved from the rock of the cave, although how long they had been there I did not know. From the feel of them, they were quite weathered in the middle. We were led into a small chamber. On one side was the cave mouth where we saw him waving to us earlier, and on the other another larger chamber filled with what I will describe in a second. The monk showed us the outside of the cave mouth, which opened up onto a small ledge and a full view of the lake. "A beautiful thing, isn't it? As beautiful as it is holy," he said affectionately about the lake as he usually did. He seemed strangely attached to it, the old man. "Where does it empty?" I asked curiously. "It empties in another greater cave, located under the deepest part of the lake, and continues in a long underground river, which I think either empties into the ocean or reaches some dead end, many miles away from here. There was once a knight like yourself who came here to explore that cave. I don't know what he was after. He disappeared into the lake, and I never saw him again." I nodded, and I turned around to get the first good look at what was in the room adjacent to this one. The monk's cave, although being an inhospitable place, still seemed replete with holiness. For lighting the chamber was the inviting glitter of what seemed like a millefleur of candles hung delicately among the stalactites of the cavern. Some were almost a yard in height, and other ones, almost burnt down to the bottom, had wax trails much, much longer than their actual bodies. The stalactites on the ceiling dripped water, no doubt the same water that flows in the falls above, and below many of these stalactites were placed many varieties of rusted wooden or silver chalices collecting the water of the cavern. In the far corner I even espied a sword, perfectly balanced on a rock and being splashed by drops of water, its blade sparkling with calcitic luster. But like in the Grail Castle, I asked nothing of it.
Okay, fellows, bit of a change of plans, but what I'm going to do is that I'm going to take this spoon, going to spoon out a fair amount of this resin, put it into this cup, and then mix that with more resin that's undyed to make the color a little less extreme. And I'm going to pour that in. So I'm basically doing the second layer right now, but it's all complicated. I'll just do it.
In the background, Sir Bruce had a boring conversation with the monk if his home was a hermitage or a monastery. Bruce maintained it was a hermitage, yet the priest seemed unwavering that it should be a monastery, although he was the only one there. As soon as I could, I asked the old hermit one of my most pressing questions. "Why, old hermit? Why are you secluded in this cave, in this waterfall, deep in the forest, far away from any road?" He looked at me. "Are you a Christian man, traveler?" he asked suddenly. I stood straight up and responded in the wisest way I could. "Yes," I said. "Well, then surely you are familiar with the concept of brothers secluding themselves from the amble and loathe of human civilization and striking off to live alone and unhindered from the pursuit of enlightenment?" I responded that I had. "Then that's what I'm doing here, and you should be grateful for my charity," he added severely. Me and Bruce were quick to thank him. Then he gave me and Sir Bruce food and more water from the lake, which tasted sweet. He let us rest there for a space of 2 hours while he went into the forest to do whatever he had to. When he came back, we began to converse again. "I thank you for the hospitality. We've been hard-pressed these past few days," I told him. "Why?" he asked blankly. After accepting his hospitality, out of guilt, I was very hesitant to tell him anything. "Me and my friend here, we were not just traveling on our own, but with a larger regiment of knights, and against our wishes, I assure you, we became deserters." His face turned grave. Deserting an army fighting a war justified by God's will was like deserting the side of God himself, and this was a very ignoble offense. The food lost all of its taste as he stared like that at me, and shame ran through my heart. As usual, Sir Bruce was quiet in the background, but didn't seem at all perturbed. Like in all other times, the climate of the situation didn't seem to matter to him, for he knew in the end he wasn't in the wrong. "What was the reason you were obligated to desert, then?" the monk asked. "It's a complicated affair," I began. I explained to him the reason for my deserting, in all of its length. We would still reach the Helmberg where we were meant to go, I assured him, and that I wasn't evil. This comment piqued his interest, and under his scrutinizing gaze I started to slip and told him about how I grew up in a pagan community and only half accepted Christianity, even though I wished dearly to fully embrace it, although I could never let go of my roots and my preferences incompatible with the new religion. When I finished, the monk chastised me for deserting. and for holding on to heathen beliefs. But he explained in a sympathetic and avuncular way that foul deeds, even half-justified ones, naturally came of those who grew up in heavily pagan areas, which made me feel all the more ashamed. He ushered Sir Bruce out of the chamber, and led me into the chamber full of candles, and down another short flight of stairs into another room with no other passage and no light from the outside, much smaller, lit by many more candles and stalactites eternally dripping. As he led me in, I stood, and watched one of those stalactites dripping single droplets of water. Wearily I asked him, "Why are these waters sacred?" He responded, "I will tell you. Kneel here." I kneeled, and became very quiet as I knew kneeling to be very important to Christians. I looked at his face, now made mostly of black shadows. He began to speak in riddles. "These waters, and many others like them all over the world, are indeed holy, for the earth is a garden, and the firmament is heaven, and the soil within the garden is the people of the earth. Every season, after the old crop is spent, and when heaven is wanting to do so, rains shower from the firmament, each with its own different personalities and tongues, and every piece of the soil is spattered at different places with these raindrops, which form bubbles that swell, greater and greater, until they may overpower in greatness other bubbles in rare pockets of dry earth around them. They so grow in greatness and self-realization, until they inevitably burst, and much of their inborn integrity is lost. But 'tis a small sacrifice for the contents splashed all around where the bubble resided, who now soak the whole patch of soil in a like mixture, into which it settles and fertilizes the land to grow a new species whose wellness is determined from the mixture of the waters. For if the water that irrigates a garden be foul, the crops will die, or be likewise foul, and if the rain is pure, then it will flourish. And so the crops of the soil drink for the water of wisdom, the ideas inherited seemingly at random as if showers from heaven, and there grows a new generation. You, my seedling, are of an old generation, one that was seeded by foul mixture of tales of lies and tongues that spoke cruel and evil things, one that bred atheists, pagans, nihilists, murderers, and defialists. In the new world, you and your contemporaries cannot last for long. They are doomed. Now the bubble of the new generation is growing in all of Ephraim's, and Mulvin too, and the bubble is forming at the Helmberg, that bubble of which I am a part of. It shall engender a new crop of greater people, of which you could be a part of, should you choose to drink the water that showers from heaven, which is like manna from heaven, and choose to relish and absorb its purity into your soul. Here he took one of the rusted old cups from under a dripping stalactite, which when he picked up produced a faint cracking sound as if it had been fused there for some years, and brought it to me. "Drink, traveler, drink of the truth, and the truth shall set you free." My heart moved. I took the cup from his hand and doled myself a hearty draught, until I had consumed the whole thing. The water of the cup floated to my throat and left an acidic sting. I cringed at its bitterness. "It tastes bitter," I told him. "Yes, such is the taste of everything we don't yet understand," he responded. "But only through drinking the entire cup of a mixture do we come to understand its content," he added wisely. His words are true, for after I drank of it, the taste seemed to become sweet, the sweetest of all waters I have ever drank, and sweeter than the water in the lake outside. You have drank of the water, and, should you choose to accept its wisdom, you will be saved. But if by and by you fail to appreciate its sweetness, the mixture's power upon your soul will cease, your heart will fade, and your soul will never understand purity, and before the land is fertilized again, you will die. These wise words, whose impact on me at that single moment were great, moved me to tears, although I did not understand all of them at once. As he was leading me out of the chamber and presumably back on my way, I kept my quest in mind and asked him if he knew the location of the Grail. "The Grail!" he exclaimed, like I exhumed some long and unthought memory of his. For a second a smile came upon his face, as if he laughed a second time that earlier his humorous comment about my quest turned out to be true. "Why, the Grail is part of what you had just drank right now, from that very cup." And with a smile he pointed to the chalice that I'd put back under its stalactite. I was visibly confused. Unfortunately for my confusion, he continued.
Well, today's been a very eventful resin pour for me. It's basically hard now. That was a lot more stress-inducing and a lot more harrowing than I thought that it would be. There was a lot that it didn't capture on camera about me having to, like, keep running back and forth and cleaning stuff with isopropyl alcohol and, like, getting rid of gloves and trying to clean containers and trying to, like, work the resin to make it perfect. And in the end, I got about as good as a result as I think I could expect. I don't know if you could see it very well, but I actually, like, like majorly messed it up around this area. Like you can see undulations in the resin, and that's actually because I wanted to dye that area a tiny bit greener. So I put the green in there, but it was like almost solid below a small layer of resin. So I had to like twirl it around the best I could to work it in, but it was almost entirely cured. So it wasn't working very well. I had to, and in the end it just came out like this. There's sort of a crease around here too. I don't know what caused that. The air bubbles was also a big problem. You probably saw footage of me looking like a dork trying way too hard to blow it out with my breath. And as such, there's kind of an unsightly trail of bubbles right here that I couldn't get out. I kind of regret dyeing this area about as dark as I had. And what's actually kind of funny is that when I let it cure outside, there's a little gnat got stuck in it. Yeah, a little gnat. Yeah, I'm going to zoom in a second so that you can see him. Yeah, there's a little gnat. When I found him, it was too hardened for me to actually take him out. Not gonna lie, I actually kind of feel bad for this little gnat. He probably died a horrible death drowning in resin. Sad. I guess the lesson here is that if you really want to protect your resin pour, maybe keep it inside or put a big bucket over it. I didn't bother with that step, and I guess I paid the price. Overall, the resin, I guess I'm kind of... I can't bring myself to say I'm totally satisfied with it. The resin is way too dark. I can't see anything. The color's rather flat. I just wish that I could have mixed fewer drops of paint in there, because I actually had moments where I told myself, this is way too much paint, I mixed in way too much. And then I kept on going, and then I kept mixing in more paint. Why did I do that? You know, I might even go so far as to say that I'm kind of disappointed with it. So it's the next day now. These here are my waterfalls that I made out of hot glue. And I do actually like the look of them. But an idea struck me. An idea in the form of this little thing that I used at the beginning of the video. This was some Mod Podge that I peeled off of resin. So I just got this idea to remake these waterfalls with the same dimensions, except out of Mod Podge instead. I'm going to be laying the Mod Podge right on here, and when it dries I'm going to peel it off, okay? That's what I'm going to do.
The Grail, the serving cup from which Christ drank the day of the Last Supper, its location is hidden to all but the very enlightened few, or so they say, and all those folks are dead. And of that exact place I am afraid I cannot tell. But what I can tell is that this very waterfall is a holy spring that flows from its excellence. Yes, it is. And I can tell, for the mixture of these waters are so that it is hard to mistake for any but those that flow, perhaps bastardized, but relatively unhindered from its single quality of excellence, the font of all magic and beauty, flora and fauna, might and majesty, knowledge and unknowledge. There the human spirit is nurtured, or more like delivered to its body. There one will experience total and complete self-fulfillment in God and all the mysteries of the universe. How do you know any of this, old man? I asked. I know the Grail is tied to this place, not from my mind, nor from my experience, or even my heart, but from somewhere else in me. I think it is my soul. I seem to understand mysteries I could not guess at otherwise, and believe them for certain. I know this to be true, for water is obviously the thing that engenders life anywhere it runs, and where could all the pure water of the world come from other than some single point? And what is the Grail except the single quality of good and righteousness that all men strive for, but inevitably cannot only fail to attain, but be wounded in the process by their original sin and natural cowardice? It is plain to me that the rains from heaven flow not just from the clouds above, but are delivered from a single entity somewhere, where into this lake flows its greatness. This strange soliloquy made me roll my eyes, and I began to question the Christian concept of living alone in a cave, free from the pleasures of mankind, of providing any enlightenment at all, or just making you go crazy.
This resin, it's just so satisfying to feel. I know I'm getting my greasy fingerprints all over it, but it's so satisfying. It's such a solid object. You don't get that very much in the hobby. For a while I was actually very nervous about this resin. I thought it looked too dark. I think I used way too much color here. Look over there, you can't even see through it at all. Total failure. This undulation here was unsightly. It was ruining it for me. This method of using the Mod Podge for the waterfalls, quite helpful if you don't want to use silicone, but it is also extremely fragile. Back these waterfalls with some other piece of plastic or something. I tried adding that Mod Podge water effect on, but I really didn't like the look of it. Mod Podge is actually overrated for water effects. You can barely see it. It probably works better for some people, but for me, whenever I try using the Mod Podge technique, I basically can't even see it. If you look at it in the light, ooh, you can tell that there's a little bit of a ripple there. Like, I'm sitting right here and I literally cannot see anything. It just doesn't work. So I peeled it off. But since I took off the plexiglass, I shaved down the edge a bit, and letting it sit for a couple days, I actually decided that I really do like this water here. Even this undulation here doesn't bother me anymore. You honestly can't really see it all that much. I'm actually really happy with how this came out. It gets across the depth and the color that I originally wanted to show. And I'm actually really proud of this mist that I added off camera with the polyfiber. Some people don't like the look of it, but I think that here it works pretty well. Sometimes you just gotta let something sit with you before you realize that you like it. Overall, this was a good learning experience with big resin pours. I've actually never done one this big before. I've only done a couple, but they are super fun, even if they are nerve-wracking.
And have you sipped of this grail? I asked. Or perhaps you want to if you talk about it in such a way. Oh no, not me. You could tell because I'm not dead. If I'm not mistaken, nary a few people who have actually found the thing and drank of its water come back from there who aren't dead somehow. Although I know for certain of its existence, not just through the intuition of my soul, but through the experience of some who were very adventurous in their day. And I can say that even just the sight of it sharpens a man's mind down to the ricasso of its blade, the bluntest point of one's brain where man turns back into beast. I started to get the feeling that this spiel was something he told everybody who came here. You're going off again, my man, I said a little tersely. Going off on what? Well, if it suits you, then you may best be off on your way and just forget about me entirely. Although if you really do want to find this grail of yours, it might help not only to really swish and swirl the taste of the mixture in your mouth and in your mind, but to follow the river that is the spring of it, for it is a sacred river that, wherever it leads you, which I cannot promise will be the grail itself, can't lead to anywhere where there is not enlightenment to be found. I merely nodded. I best be on my way, I responded. And no, I am afraid I will not be following the river, but the path that leads to the Halmberg. Thank you for your wise words, old monk, although they mean nothing to me, yet. And thank you for the water and the food. I like the taste. We bade each other goodbye and commended each other to God. Wherever that river led, which according to him was not anywhere without enlightenment, made me contemplate where in the world there was no enlightenment to be found at all. Unfortunately, I did not follow the river at that moment, although I was determined to do so once my current quest was completed, and I found no other side quests to further detain me. Although I also wondered if one could make it through life at all if they did nothing but pursue every quest they were given. I left the monastery of the Holy Falls and met back with Sir Bruce. I told him jokingly that I had achieved total enlightenment, and he chided me for it. Wisdom cannot go in if you throw tomatoes at it and make fun of the shape of its nose, he said. For once I had to acknowledge that he may have been right. Although I had quickly lost much faith in that man during our conversation, I still did as he said, and let the taste of the mixture swirl and swish in my mouth, and let his words weigh upon my mind.
I do intend to make more progress videos on this waterfall until we complete it together, and we can hear more stories together too. Anyway, that's it for this episode of the Diorama Fabulous Craft Shop. If you liked the story, please tell me why. What will the next episode be? I don't know, it'll probably come out in a month. Just stay subscribed if you want to see what it is, okay? Bye.